On any given day, millions of developers around the world are building software in Java, Python, and other open source platforms. Odds are they're using a tool or framework governed by an Ottawa-based organization, playing an important role in ensuring tech companies can bring cutting-edge advances in IoT, AI, autonomous vehicles, and cloud applications to market quickly and affordably. The Eclipse Foundation has more than 24 employees based out of its Baseline Road headquarters, as well as another dozen in Europe, administering and governing a global community of developers. We're going to explore the impact the Eclipse Foundation has made on the tech sector, both here in Ottawa and around the world, this week on Techopia Live. Welcome to Techopia Live. I'm Peter Kavesi from the Ottawa Business Journal. We're continuing to record Techopia Live remotely as we all respect physical distancing requirements. Joining us today from his home office is Mike Milikovic, the Executive Director of the Eclipse Foundation. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Peter. Really happy to be here.
I was wondering if you can just start by setting the stage. Why is it so important when we're talking about open source software that there is a governance model, and in this case, a governance body in place?
Yeah, so it's really important to understand that open source is how a ton of innovation, actually the majority of innovation, is happening around the world these days. So places like GitHub, for example, is an excellent example of where developers can come together and work on projects. So then the question is what's the role of an institution like the Eclipse Foundation? And really what we're bringing forward is the ability to manage large projects where we provide the IP governance, the governance of how the decisions are made, and the infrastructure for companies and individuals to collaborate on large, complicated innovation projects. It's really important to remember that we don't actually have any developers on staff at the Eclipse Foundation. Everything that we do and all the technology we produce, and there's over 375 projects at the Eclipse Foundation today, all of that technology is produced by volunteers and but also people who work for some of the largest, most widely recognized companies in the world that are collaborating together on moving technology and innovation forward.
So give me a snapshot about what you and your team are working on right now.
That's one of the problems that we have is there's so much going on, it's really hard to explain. But a couple of things that I find personally interesting and exciting are areas like edge computing. I personally love to play with Raspberry Pis, and it's sort of a hobby of mine. And we actually are the open source community center of gravity, if you will, for IoT. But we also have a couple of really interesting projects that are bringing cloud technologies like Kubernetes out to the edge. And so if you think about what that means is like we built all this great infrastructure for doing cloud computing. But now there's this pendulum swing that's going back to distributed computing, and how can we push these application workloads to the edge of the network? And so being able to deploy, manage, and run applications on the edge is something like Eclipse.io Fog or Eclipse Fog 05 were designed to do. So that's one area that's pretty exciting. Another area is deep learning for J. Is another project that we have at Eclipse that's focused on machine learning and AI. And it's been around for a couple of years, and it's actually if you're using a phone, a smartphone, particularly an Android smartphone, that learns how you type and starts auto-correcting your words, then there's a good chance that deep learning for J is running on your phone somewhere. So there's a lot of examples of technology like this that we have at the Eclipse Foundation, and one of the biggest challenges in a job like mine is just simply keeping up with all of the new projects and the technology trends that we're working with.
So, and I totally understand that your mandate and your impact is global in nature. But just for our audience, can you help give us some examples of the impact that the Eclipse Foundation has made on Ottawa's technology sector in particular?
Yeah, sure. So the original Eclipse project, and the one that the name of the foundation shares, was an open source project that IBM put forward in 2001. Now, it's really important to remember in 2001, it's almost 20 years ago, IBM open sourcing a large project was like headline news at the time. It was something that really would change the marketplace. And that first project was the Eclipse IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. It's basically the tool set that a professional developer uses to build their programs. And so the Eclipse IDE was, it's most famous for Java, but also C and C++. There's an Eclipse IDE for that. There's an Eclipse IDE for Python, PHP, Rust, Go, Dart. I mean, pretty much every language that you can think of, there's an Eclipse plugin or Eclipse IDE for. So one of the very first things that the Eclipse Foundation really did in terms of industry impact was providing professional level development tools for developers around the world, including at that time, you think the very beginning of globalization of technology back in the early 2000s, basically every one of the big SIs in India and China and so on were all using the Eclipse IDE as their tool set as they ramped up their sophistication in development and software. Now, in terms of how that impacts Ottawa, a couple of things. First, on the producer side, the contribution side, the core team for the original Eclipse IDE came from IBM Canada at the time, and it was actually a subsidiary of IBM called OTI, Object Technology International, which sprung out of the computer science research labs at Carleton University. I worked there. I and my colleagues mostly were, former grad students at the computer science school in Carleton. And that's really that was the core team that built the Eclipse IDE. In other places where it impact is the team at QNX were the prime movers behind the C and C++ development tools that were built on top of the Eclipse platform as well. And QNX remains involved in the Eclipse Foundation even up to now. In terms of local impact, pretty much any developer that you might meet who's working in Java, C or C++, Python, PHP, any of these very popular programming languages, certainly has heard of Eclipse and probably has about a 50% probability that that's what they use on a day-to-day basis as their development tool.
So again, in addition to that, impact, on industry, as you were sort of mentioning, that Eclipse has really strong ties to post-secondary institutions here in Ottawa. You mentioned how Eclipse's, roots can be traced back to Carleton University. And I was also reading just before our interview how the University of Ottawa is a member of the Eclipse Foundation's open hardware group. We hear a lot of great stories about local tech firms collaborating with academia. And one resource that's available to many businesses is the University of Ottawa's Faculty of Engineering, which is one of the supporters of Techopia Live. There's an opportunity for local companies to solve technical challenges through research partnerships at the University of Ottawa. The faculty's researchers are focused on applying their expertise to tackling real-world problems and are keen to work with businesses to bring these solutions to market. These collaborations can unlock funding opportunities as well as lead to grants for hiring PhD students. Companies can also access labs, specific equipment, and gain access to world-leading researchers. You can learn more about the opportunities available to local firms at engineering.uottawa.ca. Mike, as we look ahead, the Eclipse Foundation is undergoing a significant expansion. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so over the last quarter, actually, so the COVID-19 pandemic is throwing everybody's plans up in the air, but we probably had our most rapid growth quarter of growth ever in the first quarter of this year. We signed up 37 new members. We set up 5 new working groups, and we brought in 11 new projects, open source projects into our portfolio of technologies. So it's been extremely busy. Now where do these members and technologies come from? So you mentioned Open Hardware Group earlier, and so Faculty of Engineering at Ottawa U recently became a member of both the Open Hardware Group and the Eclipse Foundation. And what that group is working on is building out processor designs. And the reason why a university would join that is teaching students, especially grad students, in terms of how you can influence performance of computing by trying different experiments with processor designs is a lot easier if the processor design is open source. And that's really the collaboration that we're building with the Open Hardware Group, is about bringing a next generation set of processor designs built on the RISC-V instruction set forward for researchers and industry to build out new processors. So that's one of the areas and that's actually been one of the most rapid areas of growth for us. As I mentioned in the first quarter of this year, is I think 27 or 29 new members to the Eclipse Foundation came to us via the Open Hardware Group. Other areas of rapid growth, again, go back to Edge and IoT. Those are two of the most areas where we're attracting the most new projects. And another area that we haven't really touched on yet is cloud computing. The Eclipse Foundation is actually the steward of what used to be called Enterprise Java, or Java EE. All of that technology was moved by Oracle into the Eclipse Foundation over the last couple of years. And this is the basic technology that actually Amazon uses to run AWS and its own shopping centers, its shopping capabilities. And every software vendor out there is using, that's in the cloud, is using both Java in terms of implementing their own infrastructure, but also providing workloads, support for workloads written in Java. And a lot of these technologies a lot of these applications are using technologies which are specified and built in Eclipse Foundation projects. So cloud computing is another major area of growth and focus for us.
Those are some fantastic fields, and it's so exciting to hear just how much of how an Ottawa organization is really so much at the center of all these exciting developments.
Yeah, I think in a certain degree we're the classic Canadian success story, right? We're world famous, and nobody at home has ever heard of us.
Well, hopefully we can start to change a little bit. Let's change that a little bit through this. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Before I let our audience go, I just want to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors, without whom Techopia Live would not be possible. We have Number Crunch, offering virtualized CFO services for SaaS companies. Perley Robertson, Hill & McDougall, a leader in business and tech law. TD Bank, with specialized programs for tech firms. The University of Ottawa's Faculty of Engineering, creating the next generation of technical talent. And Stratford Managers, providing services to help you scale your tech venture. Techopia is not just this great show. We're publishing articles online daily at obj.ca/Techopia. If you're watching us on YouTube, please be sure to leave us a like, a comment, and do subscribe to our channel. And be sure to follow us on social media at Techopia OTT on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of Techopia Live.